Hello. So today I'll be reviewing my research, and I did my research on conflict in the workplace. Conflict is inevitable when it comes to our personal relationships, our friendships, and even our professional lives. When we think of conflict, we immediately jump to that idea of conflict being negative. While that's true, having conflict can also have positive effects as well. When conflict is well managed, it can improve problem solving and innovation, increase employee involvement and commitment, and clarify work processes and goals. How conflict is managed is the biggest detriment of whether a conflict has those positive or negative outcomes. So my argument with this research is when experiencing conflict in the workplace, it's important to understand what conflict is, how it affects us, and how to properly manage it so that it does not negatively affect us. There are many different definitions of conflict, but conflict in itself can vary because it's been so difficult to define. So according to our text, conflict is a disagreement that arises when two or more parties perceive a threat to their interests, needs, or concerns. We all experience conflict in many aspects of our lives. Some examples of personal conflict could be disagreeing with a close friend on where to go to dinner, disagreeing with your husband on what house to purchase for your family. Some professional conflicts in the workplace could be disagreeing with a coworker on how to handle a certain situation with a client, disagreeing with policies set in place by your human resource in the agency that you work for. Conflict can really affect us in many ways. It can have all different sorts of impacts on us, and those can vary from being negative or positive. Every individual can also be affected by conflict differently as well. Conflict in general and also in the workplace can affect our well-beings. Essentially, when it's managed poorly, it can have negative long-term effects on our individual health and our overall well-being, which can produce those feelings of burnout. Workplace burnout is characterized as a type of work-related stress or a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. Job burnout can affect your physical and mental health. To find out if you have workplace burnout, you just have to ask yourself some questions like, do you feel like you're dragging yourself to work? Is it hard to get started when you get to work? Do you feel like you're becoming impatient or irritable with clients or coworkers? If you're able to answer yes to questions like that, it's likely that you are experiencing some type of workplace burnout. There's many things that can cause workplace burnout. These things can include such things as unclear work expectations, that lack of support or control, or an imbalance in work-life activities. There are many consequences as well to having workplace burnout. Some are medical, while others are more psychological. According to Mayo Clinic, job burnout can lead to excessive stress, fatigue, insomnia, sadness, anger, irritability, alcohol or substance abuse, heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and being vulnerable to other illnesses. Conflict can really affect our self-esteem, which can lead to that depression or other somatic symptoms. Workplace conflict can also be very distracting for not only the people close to the conflict, but others involved in the workplace as well. If an employee experiences conflict, they may begin to overthink or obsess about that situation, which can affect their work output and their productivity. As an employee, you want places that you feel that you're being supported, that you're being encouraged, or that you're being needed. And conflict can really interrupt that process for employees. High conflict or unresolved conflict for a long period of time may lead an employee to leave the organization, which can in turn have the organization have really high employee turnover. Like I've mentioned before, experiencing conflict is inevitable. But the goal as a supervisor or an employee is to not let conflict escalate or find positive and productive ways to manage conflict. This can be done by turning conflict into constructive conflict. By doing this, you're making that conflict more positive or productive. To create constructive conflict, organizations, they often punish conflict avoiders. According to our text, rewarding employees who engage in this type of conflict can help to reduce employees' fear of rejection. So simple gestures such as thanking employees, that shows them that it's okay to use their voice. When hiring employees, it's important to hire individuals who are comfortable with constructive conflict. And also another way to support this is to have employees discuss issues and then to get together and go over different points of views, because that ensures that multiple perspectives are being considered. The most important thing when managing conflict or trying to resolve conflict is that it involves that proper communication. So to be an effective communicator, you must have skills such as being an active listener, being clear, being empathetic and present, and developing that trust and rapport. Perspective taking, creating solutions, being able to express emotions, reaching out, and documenting areas of agreement or disagreement are important things to remember when resolving conflict. Things not to do when resolving conflict is avoiding the conflict, feeling like you need to win at all costs, displaying anger, or demeaning the other party or retaliating. A key element in managing conflict by communicating is having the ability to negotiate. So what is negotiation? It's a process in which two or more parties make offers, counteroffers, and concessions in order to reach an agreement. There's two types of negotiation according to our text, and that's distributive negotiation and integrative negotiation. Distributive negotiation states that any gain to one party is offset by an equivalent loss to the other party, while integrative negotiation is a win-win negotiation in which the agreement involves no loss to either party. Integrative negotiation is the type of negotiation that is often favored because it's seen as a win-win solution and almost always involves compromise. Having good negotiation skills is important to have in the workplace because it helps build relationships. So how does all of this reflect or relate to a biblical worldview? Throughout the Bible, in all the books in the Bible, for example, the book of Luke, we're taught about forgiveness, which also can be essential to conflict resolution. In the book of John, we're instructed to love one another. In Romans, we're told to live in peace and harmony with one another. In Corinthians, we're told to settle our differences among ourselves and be patient, kind, and tenderhearted toward one another. In Philippians, we are to consider others before ourselves. And really, if we're able to do all of these things in Christ, we will live a life that involves that minimal conflict, and we'll also be able to produce that constructive conflict as well. If for whatever reason we do experience conflict, we just need to remember these things that we learn from the Bible, and that God teaches us, because these are all great tools to be very good at resolving conflict.